Claire was finishing up her work in the kitchen, wiping down the counter and stacking the last of the dishes, when the sudden ring of the doorbell made her jump slightly. It was unusual for anyone to visit unannounced on a quiet Thursday afternoon, and she wasn't expecting anyone, especially not someone connected to Jacob's soccer life, which usually ran its own predictable rhythm of school announcements and weekend games. She set the dish towel down and walked to the door, curiosity mixed with mild apprehension, and opened it to see Mr. Daniel Harris, Jacob's coach, standing there with a polite smile and a folder tucked under his arm. He looked a little uneasy, as if the walk to their house had been weighed with thoughts he hadn't yet managed to sort through, and the way he held the folder suggested a mixture of professionalism and something more personal. "Hi, Mrs. Carter," he said gently, the kind of greeting that made her think he wanted to keep things formal yet felt the need to soften the tension she didn't realize she was feeling. "Do you have a few minutes? I wanted to discuss Jacob's progress." Claire, though surprised by the unexpected visit, stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in, and noticed how the sunlight streaming through the living room window caught in his hair and softened his sharp features in a way that made her heart skip without her understanding why. She offered him a seat, and they both settled into the familiar, cozy living room that had hosted many ordinary conversations, yet today it felt different, as if the walls themselves were waiting to hear what he had to say. He opened the folder, flipping through neatly organized papers, charts, and notes, but his eyes kept darting back to hers, betraying a hesitation that contradicted the professional demeanor he tried to maintain. "So, Jacob's doing really well," he began, his voice calm but with a subtle edge of nervousness. "His skills have improved, his attitude on the field is commendable, and I see him taking more initiative during practice, which is exactly what we hope to see at this stage." Claire nodded, feeling pride swell in her chest for her son, but she couldn't ignore the faint tension in Mr. Harris's expression, a tension that made her realize this was not just a routine update. She poured him a cup of tea, and as she returned with it, she noticed the way he accepted it, fingers brushing hers ever so slightly, sending a strange warmth through her that she quickly pushed aside, focusing on the conversation at hand. He cleared his throat and looked down at the papers again, seemingly gathering courage. "Mrs. Carter," he said slowly, and Claire felt the words hanging in the air like fragile glass, "there's something else I need to tell you, something I didn't expect to have to say, and it's not really about Jacob." Claire froze for a second, unsure of what he meant. Her mind raced through possibilities. Was there a concern about Jacob she didn't know? Was it about the team, an issue at school, or something entirely different? The silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside, and she realized that she was holding her breath, waiting. Mr. Harris's gaze met hers, steady yet vulnerable, and for a moment, Claire felt a curious flutter in her chest, a mixture of anticipation and an unexpected, unnameable emotion. "It's about me," he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper, as though saying it aloud made it more real and terrifying at the same time. "Spending time with Jacob, coaching him, being part of his progress, it's made me reflect on things I hadn't noticed before, feelings I didn't expect, and I think it's important you know." Claire's mind struggled to keep up with the words. She was used to seeing Mr. Harris as a composed, professional figure, but now there was a vulnerability she hadn't noticed, a hint of a person beneath the coach's uniform, someone who cared not only about Jacob but about the environment he was stepping into and the people in it. She took a slow breath, trying to process the sudden, delicate revelation, feeling an unfamiliar tension between curiosity, caution, and a strange, tender pull she didn't fully understand. The moment was interrupted by the distant rumble of the school bus, signaling Jacob's imminent return, and both of them were reminded that ordinary life was about to resume, but something between them had already shifted subtly, leaving an unspoken connection that neither could easily dismiss. Claire offered a gentle, encouraging smile, masking the swirl of emotions inside her, and Mr. Harris returned it with a small, grateful nod, as if acknowledging a bridge had been built in a single, unexpected conversation. The tea sat cooling on the table, forgotten for a moment, as they both absorbed the weight of what had just been shared, realizing that some confessions arrive quietly, unplanned, yet leave a lasting mark. As Claire glanced toward the front window, waiting for her son's familiar figure to appear, she couldn't help but notice how the ordinary afternoon had transformed into something quietly extraordinary. A moment suspended in time where hearts seemed to communicate in subtle glances, in soft words, and in the tender acknowledgement of feelings that neither dared to fully define yet. The knock of the bus door against the pavement outside sent a small shock through the room, a reminder of reality returning, but the air between them remained charged, a delicate promise of change, of understanding, and of something that could grow quietly, beautifully, and unexpectedly, all beginning with a simple visit, a folder in hand, and a confession neither had expected. And in that brief encounter, Claire felt a fluttering hope and a cautious excitement, realizing that life sometimes surprises in the most ordinary moments, turning them into memories that linger long after the day has ended, leaving hearts quietly shifted and futures quietly imagined. Claire poured the tea with hands that trembled slightly, though she tried to keep her composure, and set the cup gently in front of Mr. Harris, who accepted it with a small nod, his eyes never leaving hers, carrying a weight of sincerity that made her heart thump faster than she expected. And as she sat down across from him again, she realized that the conversation had already moved beyond the usual boundaries of coach and parent, entering a space that felt intimate, delicate, and charged with an unspoken understanding, where every glance and pause seemed to carry meaning that neither wanted to speak aloud yet, and she found herself curious and unsettled at the same time, wondering what had prompted this unexpected honesty. He took a slow sip of the tea, setting the cup down with a faint clink, and leaned forward slightly, as if the words he was about to speak were both a relief and a risk, a confession that could change everything in ways he hadn't anticipated. And Claire felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and a strange warmth, realizing she was invested in this moment more than she had expected, emotions rising in her chest that she didn't fully understand but didn't want to suppress. "I've been meaning to tell someone," he said, his voice low and measured, "that being part of Jacob's life, it's meant more to me than I imagined it would, and it's made me realize things about myself, things I didn't expect to feel." Claire's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by the personal depth of his admission, and yet she felt a strange sense of relief that he trusted her enough to share it, and her mind raced with questions and feelings, a blend of empathy, curiosity, and an unfamiliar flutter that made her heart beat faster, though she carefully maintained a calm exterior. He paused, looking down at the folder for a brief moment, then back at her with a vulnerable expression that was almost disarming, and in that gaze, Claire saw a man who was usually confident and composed on the field, showing a side few people witnessed, a side that was honest, tender, and unexpectedly human, and she felt a subtle connection forming, a quiet bridge built through sincerity and the courage to share something private. "I mean, the time I spent here, coaching Jacob, watching him grow, it's become important to me," he continued, his words slow and deliberate, "and seeing how you manage everything, how kind and supportive you are, it's affected me more than I realized." Claire's chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice, the careful way he chose each word, and she realized that this was not a fleeting thought or casual remark, but a genuine revelation that reflected his feelings in a way that felt respectful, heartfelt, and unexpectedly personal, and her own emotions responded in kind, a subtle stir of warmth and curiosity that she couldn't ignore. She leaned slightly forward, keeping her tone gentle but steady. "I appreciate you saying that, Coach Harris. It's not easy to admit personal feelings, especially when your role is professional, and I respect your honesty." He smiled faintly, relief flickering across his face, but there was still a quiet tension, a hesitation that suggested he wanted to say more but was unsure of how it would be received, and Claire sensed that the balance of professionalism and personal revelation was delicate, a line neither of them wanted to cross recklessly, yet both were drawn to the honesty between them. The air in the room seemed to hum softly, filled with a mix of emotions, pride for Jacob, empathy for Mr. Harris, and an unspoken awareness that something unexpected was forming, a subtle emotional thread that neither fully understood but both could feel, weaving gently around them, fragile yet persistent, hinting at possibilities neither dared to name aloud yet. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said finally, his voice tinged with vulnerability, "but I felt that you should know how meaningful your family has been to me, and how much I value this connection, even if it's unexpected." Claire's lips curved into a soft, genuine smile, touched by the tenderness of his words, and she realized that the moment required nothing more than acknowledgement, a quiet understanding that allowed the sincerity to exist without demanding anything further. And she felt a surprising sense of closeness, a recognition that some bonds begin not with dramatic gestures, but with quiet honesty and the courage to reveal what the heart feels. She nodded gently. "You haven't overstepped. I'm glad you shared that with me. It's not common to meet people who are both professional and genuinely caring, and I appreciate your honesty." His shoulders relaxed slightly at her response, a subtle sign that her acknowledgement mattered more than she realized, and for a moment, the room felt suspended in a delicate balance of warmth, trust, and unspoken emotions, a quiet intimacy born from respect and the courage to admit unexpected feelings. As they both took a deep breath, Claire noticed the way sunlight played across his face, softening the usual rigidity of his expression, and she felt a strange, tender pull, an acknowledgement that this conversation was leaving a mark, not just on their understanding of each other, but on her heart in a gentle, undeniable way. The distant hum of the neighborhood reminded them that life outside was continuing, yet inside the room, time seemed to stretch, allowing a shared space where emotions could be felt freely, quietly, and meaningfully, without the rush of daily routines interrupting the fragile moment. And Claire found herself acutely aware of the way his presence lingered, how the conversation had shifted from professional updates to something deeply human, tender, and quietly stirring. "I don't want to make this uncomfortable for you," he said softly, almost as if speaking the thought aloud could either protect or unravel the connection, "but I thought it was right to be honest, to let you know that your kindness, your warmth, and the way you support Jacob, it's had an impact on me that I didn't expect." Claire felt her heart respond, a subtle awareness of attraction she hadn't anticipated, and she realized that this was not a fleeting moment of admiration, but a quiet acknowledgement of feelings that, though undefined, were real and undeniable, making her aware of her own curiosity, warmth, and emotional engagement in ways that were both thrilling and gentle. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that was full yet peaceful, where no words were needed to express the subtle understanding forming between them, a recognition that life sometimes delivers unexpected honesty in small, meaningful doses, and that these moments, fragile yet potent, could linger in memory long after the conversation ended. Claire felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her, surprise, tenderness, and an unexpected hopefulness, as she considered how rare it was to meet someone whose honesty could touch her heart so gently, and she realized that the conversation, though brief and delicate, had planted the seed for a connection that neither had anticipated but both could feel beginning to grow. And as the soft light of the afternoon bathed the living room, Claire noticed how the ordinary space had transformed into something intimate, something quietly profound, where hearts were speaking softly, delicately, and honestly, and she understood, with a mixture of excitement and caution, that this was the start of an unspoken bond, one that could shape not only their understanding of each other but the emotional landscape of the days to come, leaving both Claire and Mr. Harris aware that some confessions, even small and gentle ones, could change everything quietly, beautifully, and unexpectedly, just by being shared. Jacob's arrival at the front door broke the delicate tension that had settled over the living room, and Claire quickly shifted her attention to her son, whose laughter and energy filled the house with a familiar chaos that made the previous conversation feel both distant and more intense at the same time, because now she was acutely aware of the private space that had existed between her and Mr. Harris, a space that had shifted from professional to unexpectedly personal, and even as she greeted Jacob and helped him with his bag, she could feel the quiet presence of the coach in the background, observing with a gentle, almost protective attentiveness that made her heart flutter in ways she didn't fully understand. She noticed how his eyes softened when he looked at her, a warmth that was different from the formal concern he usually showed, and as Jacob chattered about his day, asking questions and recounting practice moments with bright enthusiasm, Claire caught subtle expressions in Mr. Harris's face, a mix of pride, amusement, and something tender that seemed directed not just at Jacob but at her too, a feeling she couldn't name yet but felt keenly in the pit of her stomach. She excused herself briefly to help Jacob with his homework in the dining area, and when she returned, she found Mr. Harris looking out the window, a thoughtful expression etched across his face, as if the words he had shared earlier were still resonating and he was trying to make sense of them himself, and the sight struck her with a quiet intensity, because she recognized that vulnerability was rare in him, and seeing it now, in the peaceful space of her home, made her feel a delicate connection that was both thrilling and frightening at the same time. "I should go soon," he said softly, turning toward her, and she sensed the hesitation in his tone, the unspoken tension of wanting to stay yet feeling obligated to leave, and her heart clenched slightly at the thought of the moment ending so soon, even as she tried to keep her expression neutral, afraid to reveal how strongly his presence affected her. "I just wanted to say, thank you," he continued, his voice low but earnest, "for letting me be part of your family's life. Jacob is lucky to have such a supportive home, and I've realized that this connection, even if it's unexpected, means a lot to me." Claire nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in her throat, aware of the warmth rising in her chest, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and a quiet, confusing pull that seemed to tug at her heart with every word he spoke. She found herself wanting to reach out, to say more, but no words seemed adequate, and so she simply offered a small, sincere smile that conveyed understanding, acknowledgement, and a shared recognition of the delicate emotions now hovering between them. As he moved toward the door, she noticed the subtle way he hesitated, one hand on the doorknob, as if deciding whether to leave or speak again, and in that pause, time seemed to stretch, giving space for unspoken feelings to hover, fragile and electric, like a gentle current between two people aware of each other in new, uncharted ways. "I'll see you at practice," she managed, her voice steady, though inside she was aware of every heartbeat, every flutter of nervous anticipation, and he nodded, his smile faint but meaningful, acknowledging the words as more than routine, as if they carried a weight neither wanted to define aloud. Once the door closed, Claire leaned against it, breathing deeply, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts about what had been said and what she now felt. She couldn't deny the strange warmth that had taken residence in her chest, a mixture of curiosity, longing, and a delicate, budding attraction she hadn't anticipated but couldn't ignore, and she realized that the ordinary rhythm of her afternoon had been transformed into a moment she would replay in her mind again and again, savoring the tenderness and honesty that had been shared. That evening, as she prepared dinner with a distracted hand, her thoughts kept drifting to him, to the subtle ways he had looked at her, the gentle tone of his voice, the careful selection of words that had conveyed more than simple admiration for her son's progress, and she found herself imagining scenarios where their interactions might be more than casual, wondering what it would mean to explore the connection that had quietly begun in the warmth of her living room. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris drove home, the quiet hum of his car engine filling the otherwise empty space, and his thoughts mirrored hers in ways that were both surprising and reassuring. He replayed their conversation, noting her expressions, her attentiveness, the way she had responded to his vulnerability with grace and subtle encouragement, and he felt a gentle pull toward her, a recognition of something tender and human that he had not anticipated when he first arrived at the Carter household to discuss Jacob's soccer progress. He considered the delicate balance of professional boundaries and personal feelings, acknowledging that the emotions stirring inside him were real, yet fragile, requiring care and patience to understand without overstepping, and he found himself hoping for more interactions, more opportunities to share quiet moments that were not about strategy, drills, or scores, but about connection, trust, and the slow, careful unfolding of something meaningful. That night, both Claire and Mr. Harris found themselves awake longer than usual, replaying snippets of conversation, glances, and small gestures in their minds, feeling the weight and the lightness of emotions that neither fully understood but both acknowledged, recognizing that some connections begin quietly, in unexpected ways, through shared honesty, vulnerability, and the simple act of being present in someone else's life. Claire, lying in bed, thought about the way he had spoken of her family, of Jacob, and of his own feelings, realizing that what had started as a professional visit had blossomed into something deeply personal, a gentle acknowledgement that hearts sometimes recognize each other long before words can define the bond, and she felt a quiet thrill at the thought of future interactions, subtle yet meaningful, imagining the possibility of something tender and beautiful growing slowly, naturally, like the soft unfolding of a flower. Mr. Harris, in his own quiet space, reflected on the courage it had taken to admit his feelings, on the relief that Claire had accepted them with kindness, and on the anticipation that lingered at the edges of his mind. A careful hope that the connection they had begun to explore could develop with honesty, respect, and shared understanding, creating a delicate, emotional thread that promised warmth, tenderness, and the possibility of something quietly romantic. The following days, as they continued their routines, the awareness of each other's presence added a subtle tension to interactions, a gentle curiosity that neither ignored, filled with glances, polite smiles, and the quiet acknowledgement of feelings that had begun to take root, unspoken yet profoundly felt, a shared understanding that sometimes the heart notices truths before the mind can define them, and that these truths can quietly shape the course of ordinary life into something extraordinary. And so, as Jacob played, laughed, and grew under the watchful eyes of his coach and the loving support of his mother, Claire and Mr. Harris navigated the new, delicate connection between them, each aware of the tender pull, the warmth of shared honesty, and the quiet hope that what had begun in a single afternoon could bloom into something meaningful, beautiful, and deeply human, an emotional journey that promised to unfold with care, patience, and the gentle thrill of discovery that neither had expected but both quietly embraced. The days following their delicate conversation seemed to stretch in a way that made Claire acutely aware of every thought and feeling she had whenever Mr. Harris was near. Whether at Jacob's soccer practice or when brief messages arrived updating her on games and drills, and she noticed herself watching for his arrival with a subtle excitement that was new and unnameable. A quiet anticipation that made her pulse quicken and her mind wander to what could be. Imagining scenarios in which their connection, born from honesty and shared care, could grow into something deeper, tender, and meaningful without disrupting the lives they both cherished. At practice, she observed him coaching Jacob with the same dedication and patience as always, but now every gesture, every encouraging word, carried a hint of something personal, a gentle warmth in his tone, a softness in his eyes that seemed reserved for more than just her son, and she realized that the line between professional and personal had blurred in the most subtle, beautiful way, leaving her both intrigued and quietly longing for more moments that felt like they belonged to both their hearts, even if unspoken. During halftime one afternoon, as the team gathered near the benches and parents watched from the sidelines, Mr. Harris approached her with a careful step, his expression composed but his eyes betraying a depth of feeling that made Claire's chest tighten with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, and when he spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, and sincere, carrying a weight that was both comforting and thrilling. "I wanted to say again, Mrs. Carter, you've had more impact on me than I expected. I can't explain it fully, but your kindness, your patience, and the way you care for Jacob, it stays with me." Claire felt a rush of warmth and a blush she quickly tried to mask, nodding slightly, careful to keep her words steady while her heart raced. "I feel the same," she admitted softly, her voice carrying a quiet honesty that mirrored his. "It's surprising, and a little frightening, but I can't ignore it either." For a brief moment, they stood together, watching Jacob sprint across the field with pure joy, his laughter ringing like music, and the ordinary scene seemed transformed by the presence of unspoken emotions, a gentle current flowing between them, subtle yet undeniable, giving them both a sense of connection that neither had expected but neither wanted to dismiss. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the field in golden hues that reflected off the grass and warmed their faces, Claire noticed the faintest tremor in Mr. Harris's usual composure, a vulnerability that made him appear more human, more approachable, more profoundly real than she had ever seen on the sidelines, and she felt an unexpected tenderness rise in her chest, a combination of admiration, affection, and the quiet thrill of longing that was entirely new to her, yet felt natural in its subtle intensity. They exchanged a few more words about Jacob's progress, but each sentence seemed layered with meaning beyond the surface, every glance, every slight movement of the head, carrying emotional weight, a shared understanding that was delicate and powerful all at once. They navigated the conversation with care, neither forcing declarations nor retreating, simply allowing the honesty of their emotions to breathe and settle, creating a space of trust, warmth, and mutual curiosity that hinted at possibilities neither could yet define but both felt keenly. After practice ended and the team gathered their equipment, Mr. Harris lingered briefly by the car, speaking quietly with Claire, his hands occasionally brushing hers in casual contact that sent sparks of awareness through her. making her keenly conscious of the way his presence affected her thoughts and feelings, and she realized that each encounter, each small gesture, was building an emotional bridge between them, one constructed of respect, gentle attraction, and shared moments of authenticity that neither had planned but both were learning to treasure. That evening, as Claire prepared dinner with a distracted mind, she reflected on the events of the day, the way Mr. Harris had looked at her, the subtle softness in his tone, and the undeniable sense of connection that seemed to have deepened overnight. She imagined future practices, casual conversations, and quiet moments of shared observation, all building a tapestry of familiarity and emotional intimacy that was thrilling yet safe, tender yet grounded, and she allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings growing within her, a mixture of hope, longing, and the quiet excitement of discovery. Across town, Mr. Harris sat in his living room, thinking about Claire, replaying their conversations, her expressions, the gentle way she had responded to his vulnerability, and he felt a similar mix of emotions, anticipation, tenderness, and a cautious hope that their connection could continue to deepen naturally, without haste, without fear, allowing both their hearts to explore the possibility of something meaningful, delicate, and profoundly human. Over the next few days, the awareness of each other's feelings colored every interaction, from casual greetings at practice to polite exchanges over phone calls, creating a gentle tension that was exciting and comforting at the same time, and both Claire and Mr. Harris found themselves increasingly attuned to the small signals, the fleeting smiles, and the subtle glances that spoke volumes about what neither had yet dared to name aloud, a shared recognition that life sometimes offers unexpected bonds that grow quietly, tenderly, and without announcement, shaping ordinary moments into memories that linger and stir the heart. One late afternoon, as the team practiced in the waning sunlight, they found a quiet moment away from the others, standing side by side near the edge of the field, and Mr. Harris looked at her with a sincerity that made her pulse quicken. "I don't know where this will lead, or if it should, but I want you to know how much I value this, us, even in its early, unspoken form." Claire felt a thrill and a gentle reassurance, nodding slightly, her heart swelling with emotions she could not fully articulate but felt with absolute clarity. "I feel the same. It's new, and it's unexpected, but it feels right." They shared a quiet smile, the kind that communicated understanding, hope, and the subtle acknowledgement of feelings that neither dared to define yet, and in that moment, the ordinary world, the field, the fading sun, the distant voices of children, seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the warmth, connection, and delicate tension between them, a gentle promise of something meaningful and tender unfolding in its own time. As twilight deepened, they parted with a lingering glance, a silent understanding that the day had shifted something inside both of them, that hearts had recognized each other in quiet, honest ways, and that the unfolding story of their connection, slow, careful, and emotionally rich, was only beginning, filled with hope, longing, and the possibility of a beautiful, understated love that could grow gently, respectfully, and profoundly human, leaving both Claire and Mr. Harris aware that some of life's most significant relationships start not with dramatic declarations but with subtle honesty, shared care, and the patient, quiet acknowledgement of the heart's unexpected truths. And as Claire watched Jacob walk home, laughing with his friends, and as Mr. Harris drove away, replaying her smile and the softness in her eyes, both were left with a sense of quiet wonder, a deep, tender excitement, and a shared understanding that this was the start of something rare, fragile, and beautiful, a connection that had begun with honesty and would continue to grow slowly, carefully, and meaningfully, touching their lives in ways neither had anticipated but both had already begun to cherish.